G'day everyone, this is Iynka here. Welcome to Investor Journeys, where we chat with everyday Aussies and seasoned investors about their property journeys, the wins, the stuff ups, and everything in between. Whether they've got one property or a whole portfolio, we dive into how they did it, what they've learned, and what their journey's been like so far. No fluff, just real stories from real people. So let's get stuck in. Welcome to the Investor Journeys podcast. This is our first recording, and the real reason why I wanted to start this podcast was when I first started property investing, which was about 13 years ago. I really wanted to understand how other property investors, more about their stories and understand where they went right, where they went wrong, and just to, I suppose, understand their journeys and where I could use some of their feedback into my own journey. So really, I wanted to get more guests to talk about their stories and understand their property investment stories. So with all that being said, I've got Andre and Trisha here. Andre and Trisha, thank you for being my first guest. Really appreciate it. Really excited to have you guys on. And look, we've known each other now probably for about 13 years, so a long time through my life will be, but we all come from New Zealand actually. And really excited to have you guys on and understand your story. So thanks guys for coming on.
Thanks for having us. Absolute pleasure to be on board and excited to share what we have learned and the mistakes we've made. And hopefully other people don't follow the same mistakes that we've made in the past.
Yeah, absolutely honored to be here. Thanks for having us on, Iynka.
No worries. No, and look, I think you guys are quite modest. I know a little bit about your property investment portfolio, but we won't give too much away. But look, I think what listeners really like to understand is where our guests come from in terms of their financial background and how they grew up. And then we can get into the property investment details later. So we'll kick off by just asking you guys, you can choose who goes first, but as you guys were growing up through as a child and into high school, did you guys talk about money with the family? Was that ever a topic? Yeah, it'd be good to know what you guys sort of learned from that.
So we're both Andre and myself come from very humble beginnings. I myself grew up in a dual income household, and I remember my mother having to return fairly quickly after having both myself and my sister back to work to provide for our family. And so that environment very early on meant that we had to think very carefully. We had to think twice before asking for new things, for example. And those early experiences have conditioned our beliefs and behaviors around money, finances, and financial security.
Yeah, and I think similar, right? So it's just the immigrant backgrounds and the fact that when you first migrate to any country, you don't have the financial stability, that security, and you crave that. You crave that foundation. You crave as a family. Then I was young when we migrated. It's still something that you hold close as a value of yours in terms of just maintaining some level of financial security. And I think that little fear almost, but also value has been ingrained in us to try to find that foundation, build that foundation for ourselves and hopefully for our children as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you say you guys had a kind of frugal type environment growing up, or were your parents and family and siblings, were they big spenders?
Super frugal on our end in terms of life because financials didn't allow for big spending necessarily. So it was, yeah, very super frugal. Grew up in a 2-bedroom unit in New Zealand. Very simple lifestyle. And that's what we had simply because of just being a migrant family.
Yeah, absolutely. And you guys grew up in Auckland?
Yeah. Grew up in Auckland, the two of us.
When did you guys both move to Auckland?
I moved to Auckland in 2001, and I believe you moved very slight prior.
99. Yeah. So you're in New Zealand for a while. I understand you went to school there. And then what was the next steps for both of you?
Yes, we went to school there, went to university. I worked there for a year as well. And then in 2010, the two of us migrated to Melbourne. Our parents, funny enough, moved to Australia prior to us moving. So I think both our parents moved in 2007 or 2008 to Australia, left us behind. And then I think that's another testament, we were 21, trying to figure out financials, trying to figure out how we manage cash flow with very minimum income. And so one of the parents supported us, don't get me wrong, and we're blessed with that, but we still had to understand and be comfortable with our finances. So, which, taught us a few lessons that hopefully we used later on as we started this property journey.
Speaking of, did you guys ever talk about property with your family at all when you guys were
No,
growing up?
I never did. It's not something that my dad or my parents have ever really been big on it by any means. Yeah, like I said, we lived in a 2-bedroom unit in Australia, in New Zealand rather. So property was never part of the conversation ever. It wasn't about necessarily financial security and freedom. It was more about day-to-day living, just making sure we get by and be able to cover things as we needed to. Bless my family were able to provide for that. But it wasn't about thinking about the future as much in terms of financial investment and so on.
Yeah, amazing. And so when you guys moved to Melbourne in 2010, do you basically get into the workforce at that point in time?
Yeah, the both of us got into, in 2010. We both got into the workforce, got married 2011. And then we bought our first place, which was what we thought was our dream home and a forever home. That went out the window very soon. We'll come to that, I'm sure, soon. But yeah, in 2011, we bought our first place.
Yeah, but look, it's a very normal story, getting married, buying your own place without really having the plans in place for future investment or anything like that. Obviously, life takes over. What do you guys do just out of interest for your jobs?
I work out in technology and
I'm a health professional.
Fantastic. So now you're in Melbourne, you bought your own place. Whereabouts was that, if I can ask?
the first place we bought was in Lyndhurst. It was what we thought was a dream suburb, absolutely beautiful suburb, brand new. We built the home, built it to the way we wanted it. Park across the road for the kids to play. Everything was absolutely perfect. And then when we got to work and back, we realized the drive, I would drive back after work after 45 minutes plus in traffic, get home and I'm cranky. I was just exhausted. I was cranky. I was just over it. And so we ended up having to sell this dream house in 2016, 2017. We actually loved living there for as long as we did. It was the dream of what we thought was a dream, I think, at that point in time, not recognizing the impact to travel and the role travel has in our lifestyle.
Yeah, look, I went through a very, very similar story. And I think a lot of people do and can relate to that. In terms of affordability, especially when you're buying a place, let alone renting, when you're first starting out, you tend to go to these outer suburbs because, first of all, there's a big dream about having the backyard and the new amenities, the new parks that are going in and the new schools. And I know Lyndhurst quite well, fairly close to Cranbourne down the southeast end of Melbourne. And that takes over. And then once you actually live through the travel and the time it takes, it can take its toll, especially with your, when you're trying to build your career and you're working late and you get home at 8 o'clock because of the traffic. And not only that, there's likely going to be, because it's, correct me if I'm wrong, but Lyndhurst is quite a new development at that time. And
It was
so,
right, almost brand new development here, relatively.
yeah, and so there's a whole, not just you guys, but obviously there's thousands of families moving into that area, and it doesn't necessarily mean that the infrastructure, the roads, and especially the traffic and the infrastructure there can cope with that amount of demand. And then developments keep going on, and then that all backs up to your area. And I've gone through that before, so I can understand sort of how that feels.
Yeah, now it was trialing it. And also one of the things that was that's all we could afford at that point in time. We could only afford to buy far out. And we went thinking about, like you said, the backyard and stuff. Well, that seemed like the priority. We didn't think about the financial investment. Potentially we could invest that same money elsewhere, got a big return. That was in front of mind for us because we wanted a home, not necessarily investment, where we could have potentially had both if we really thought it through properly.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I speak to a lot of people about the dilemma of buying their own place and investing. And really it's about preferences and that kind of thing. But I think as long as people understand the whole picture between buying your own place and potentially the limitations that might have in terms of investing first and vice versa, buying investments first, you're not in your own secure home as such. And it really depends on preferences and that kind of thing.
Yeah. And for that point in time, it suited us. I think it's only once we had our first kid, then we realized the impact on the logistics and travel.
Yeah, definitely. So moving on to that, you mentioned that you sold that in 2017. So you would have lived there for about 5-6 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And did you see much appreciation in that property during that time?
We saw decent appreciation, a couple hundred K, like you do. The property market, no matter where you buy, relatively, you get land and,
Yep.
you ride the wave of Melbourne property and Australian property for that matter. And we were lucky enough to just ride that wave.
Yeah, I know Melbourne quite well in terms of their growth cycles, and it had a fairly decent growth cycle in that sort of 2011, 2012 up to that 2018, 2019 mark. So I would think that you would have done pretty well. I suppose the only caveat to that is you're trying to find another place that probably has done the same amount at that time. So you've sold that in 2017, and then you're likely going to look at your own principal place again. Is that right? Or when did property investment come into the picture for you guys?
So it was actually prior to selling our primary place of residence in Mulgrave, where in 2014, we were assessing our values and our goals around financial security and financial freedom. And we wanted a vehicle, if you may, to start to have that financial freedom and help our kids build wealth and help and give our kids a bit of a kickstart. And so we actually purchased our first investment property in 2014 in a suburb a few kilometers outside of Melbourne CBD.
Yep, I think there's a lot we can talk about with that investment because that was the worst investment we've made among the various properties we've bought since then. So happy to deep dive into that if you want, Iynka.
Yeah, well, what I'll ask before we get into it is what actually made you want to get into property? Is it because you saw that first property, your own place in 2011 grow during that time and you could see what property does? Or what was it about property rather than, I don't know, shares or Bitcoin wasn't around that time, but I'm sure there was some Fed that was around.
I think it was we could see the barriers to entry being minimum to get into property relatively. Like we had some equity in that with our PPR. We could see some other people make money off property relatively once again. And there's just enough news articles, public information out there that showed us that this could be the vehicle to make some money without as much knowledge required was my understanding at that point in time, where stocks and options and everything else was a bit too tricky, don't know where. I funny enough I've had a stock broking account since 2008, I'm gonna say. And in the last 15, 20 years, whatever however long it's been, I bought 0 shares because I have no idea what shares to buy. So that was that, indecisiveness around it, where property is like it looks like you just buy one place, get that decision over, done with, and then ride the wave. So that was what we thought in terms of getting into the property market being hopefully easier. Little did we know that there's a whole lot more to know about property than we realized. But nonetheless, it still has given us some return in the first place too.
Absolutely. Tell me about that first property then. What did you buy? How much for? Where was it? What lease you see?
Yeah. So we were looking and we went to a show like where to buy, and we came across this guy that was more of a marketing person than we realized, a sales marketing person. And so the first place was a 2-bedroom townhouse in Footscray. Now, by the numbers, at that point in time, I thought it was phenomenal because it was right next to the train station, right next to the bus stop, tram, walking distance to Victoria University, and 6 Ks from the city. All those ticked what I thought was the criteria to allow this to boom, right? And also they were providing us 5% guaranteed yield for the first 2 years. So everything just looked phenomenal. I'm like, why don't we buy a couple of these if we could? Couldn't afford it, obviously. But I was fully sold by all those numbers going, this is one of the best decisions of my life. So that seemed to have stacked up based on what I knew. However, we bought that for $550 11 years ago now, and it's barely grown by 35%, 30% or so, whatever the math is, in the last 11 years. If we paid the same amount, $500,000 elsewhere, we could have easily doubled it, very easily doubled, right? And had that capital growth, which we have not seen in this townhouse development, because we fell for the marketing gimmick. We fell for the numbers that I thought that mattered, which obviously did not matter as much as I realized. And so absolute lesson learned where I should have bought house, land, better location, and rode that wave as opposed to a townhouse. And I was thinking about the yield a bit too much, where it probably didn't matter as much, and got sold on criteria that, excuse me, that didn't play as a significant role as I thought it would. Anything to add?
Yeah, I think these sort of sales marketing schemes can be very tempting by the new bills, the shiny taps, the rental guarantees, which you were promised. I think there's a lot of people out there who hear these stories and go through with these sort of marketing schemes. I think the first thing I tell people to do if they are to look into that is to that person, do you get a cut from me buying this property, right?
Mm.
Because generally speaking, I'm not saying all of them do, but they have a ulterior motive to get you that property and really don't have your best interests at heart. And unfortunately, with the industry these days, there's no real penalties to give bad advice, although there's so much money involved with these sort of schemes that it's almost a free for all in terms of what people can tell people, and they don't even have to mention they've got a cut. Now, I think there's a lot of people lobbying for that to change, and I can tell you that I know a lot of people who have been in the same trap as such, but that's obviously a great lesson to have in your first property. I know that can sometimes derail a lot of portfolios, especially being your first. But I think once we get into your portfolio, I think it was almost a property that you obviously went through some issues with and maybe didn't have the growth that you would have liked, but it's a great lesson learner as you move forward and really get into your property portfolio and do the right things.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah, yeah. So that one's in Footscray. You guys still hold that one?
We still hold that one. I think we've had conversations for the last however many years around should we sell? Because there's always not an issue per se, but it's opportunity cost. Yeah. Could that same money investment be used elsewhere with a better return? But look, for now, it's surviving, it's providing some return. There's been some growth over the last 6-12 months to some extent compared to the last 11 years, funny enough. So, yes, for now, we're holding on to that property.
Yeah, yeah. I think if you were in a different position, as in you only had that one and maybe one other, and you was all in the same state, different story. But as we get into your property portfolio, I think the listeners will understand why you potentially have kept it. So you're going to talk to me about your next couple of properties.
Yeah, so from then, once again, lesson learned around we don't know what property to buy, and we don't want to go and pick properties, not realizing what suburb, what's the road, all these other criteria that matter. So we decided to look for buyer's agents. We went and interviewed a bunch of buyer's agents, landed on one that we thought were pretty good and they did a decent job. And with them, we bought a place in Griffin. That
No. So we actually, before we got to the investment properties, we bought another PPR where we currently reside in.
Yes.
And we've been here since then. So we purchased this in 2018. And like Andre said, we were stuck for quite a long time. We were quite overwhelmed. And as you mentioned, that Footscray purchase did derail our journey a little bit. So we realized that we did need external help. There's so much data out there, and we are just so time poor to be able to even find the right data and be able to even consume it. So after we purchased our current PPR, we decided that, let's give this another go, which is when we decided to go with the property strategist / buyer's agent. So our first investment property after that with the property strategist was a 2-bedroom, 1-bath in Central Coast, New South Wales, which we purchased in 2021 for low 800K. And the reason we purchased this was because it was on a corner block, big plot of land, and it came with a 2-bedroom, 1-bath granny flat at the back. So it meant that we were getting dual income for it.
Yeah, fantastic. How did you feel about, number one, using a professional now to get you an investment property, and number two, buying interstate? Did that give you guys nerves at all, or were you quite confident because you've now chosen a professional to do it for you?
it was slightly more the latter. There's still always a level of not anxiety, but just nervousness because it's a lot of money. It's a hell of a lot of money, right? It's pretty much the same amount of money that as our PPR kind of thing. And so, yeah, there was a level of anxiety around it, but recognizing that these guys are meant to be the experts, they're working for us to the previous point that you made, as opposed to those agents that are working for the seller when we bought the previous place. To those points, I think that give us some level of confidence that we should be all right. And we did whatever tests, whatever the inspection reports and whatever else we could do to reduce the risk whenever we can. And yeah, once again, this was not in a place that we visited, been to, or we still haven't seen the property. That has inherent risk in it. But yeah, we just had to trust the process and trust the team that we had.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure as a buyer's agent, buying properties interstate for you, they would have got the right professionals in the local area to do the inspection and do their due diligence. And so if I go back a step, you've bought your Footscray property in what year? Was that 2014?
Yep.
We purchased it in 2014, but actually it didn't settle until 2017.
Oh,
A
right.
lot of issues with the building.
Right. Okay. Got it. And so then you bought your own place in Mulgrave in which year?
2080,
2018, and now the Central Coast one?
2021.
2021. All right. So there's a bit of a 3-year gap. Okay. Got it. So now you've got your own principal place. You've got 2 investment properties. What's next for you guys?
So we then extracted the equity that we had out of Mulgrave and we purchased another investment property. So this would be number 3 with the help of the same property strategist. And this was in the northern suburbs of Brisbane. So we purchased it in 2022, so 12 months after Central Coast. And that was for mid 700s.
This property, I remember talking to you about it a little while ago. It's again a bit of a dual income scenario, isn't it?
Correct. So it's a 5-bedroom, 3 baths, but it's actually more like a duplex. So it's 3-bedroom, 2 bath and a 2-bedroom, 1 bath. And so again, dual income property.
Fantastic. And where was that located?
So that's in Griffin, which is in northern suburbs of Brisbane.
Yeah, the northeastern from memory.
Yes.
Yeah. There was a lot of infrastructure projects happening up in those northern suburbs. So that was quite a in-demand, holistic area for a lot of investors. So looks like you guys cashed in at the right time there. And I'm sure that would have done quite well. We can obviously talk about the holistic numbers later on. So you purchased that for 700?
720.
720. Yeah. Fantastic.
It's one of these properties as well, given that it has the granite flat at the back, it's hard to value. So if we do these general evaluations, it doesn't really provide a true indicator of how much it's valued at. So it's something that we just need to be aware of. But here, saying that also by the fact that it is dual income, it's worth noting that obviously during the interest rate increases over the last few years, that has been able to provide us the cash flow we needed as well to maintain the portfolio, which has been really helpful.
Especially in New South Wales, where rental yields can be very low. The Central Coast property and even Griffin in particular as well has just helped us to sort of stay neutral on not too negatively.
Yeah, which is very hard to do, staying neutral these days with the interest rates. Do you know what the rental return is per week for the Central Coast and the Griffin one? At the top of your head?
Don't know.
It's fine if you don't.
Yeah, not too sure. Just looking through the numbers.
I'd have to recalculate because we've just increased rent on that one.
Yeah, but both the properties have dual incomes at the moment.
Correct.
So you got 4 rents basically coming out of those.
All right, yes. So while it's 2 properties, it's 4 rents, which has really helped us.
Fantastic. All right. And then you're obviously doing fantastic here because, in my opinion, you've had a setback with your Footscray property because by this time it really hasn't grown, and from what I understand. And then you've got into a couple of fairly decent valued properties. I suppose these days a lot of investors are targeting a lot more affordable properties just generally from what I hear. 800K, 720K, they're certainly not on the cheaper end, especially at that time. But I think the fact that you mentioned that they've both got dual incomes really helped the situation.
Yeah, it's definitely helped the situation. Just cash flow, especially with the interest rates going crazy over the last few years. It helped us stay afloat.
Fantastic. You got 3 investment properties, and then tell me what's next. Where did you buy it and about when?
So after this happened, we were having a look at our portfolio and we noticed that, yes, we had the cash flow, but we didn't have the capital growth. And capital growth really is where you build wealth. So then, our wonderful friend Iynka, you might know him, he set up the Wealth Engineers. And so we had a chat with you, obviously. And so our next property purchase, this one has been a real game changer. So we purchased, obviously, at this stage with 3 property purchases, we were already leveraged out quite a fair bit. And so we didn't have much of a budget to play with. So we looked at, you were brilliant. Just want to say that. So we purchased a property in Perth for 300,000, and this was in 2023.
Fantastic. So 300,000. I do recall that one. We were looking at Perth in around sort of 22, 23. I actually personally bought a couple of properties, 3 properties in 22 in Perth. And I do remember that one. And that one at 300,000 was an absolute steal. And tell me more about that property and how that's performed.
So big plot of land, 3 bedroom, 1 bath, I believe. Bit of an older property, so there's always maintenance that needs to be done on it. But the reason I say that it's a game changer, this one for our portfolio, because just last month it was valued at 550.
So that significant growth in just a 3-year period.
Yeah, absolutely. Less than 2 years, almost doubled your money, which is fantastic. So I think that's the power of these sort of affordable markets mixed with understanding the growth drivers for particular areas. And I think, yes, we identified with you guys your current portfolio and having that leverage, and especially if there was one property that was vacant at a time, that mortgage would be quite a big burden, I suppose, on your situation. And then identifying this one at a much more affordable price was really good. And I think, look, credit to you guys, you guys, again, actioned it at the right time. And now you've got your 4th property with some really fantastic growth on that one. And the rent is, I'm sure, just keeps on rising there as well. So that's great. And then moving forward, what was your next purchase?
So our next purchase,
Can I just talk to this one also? Just before we go to the purchase as well. At this point in time, we were pretty much done.
Yeah.
We were done.
Yeah.
And there was conversation, right? What does it look like in 2025 being this year to buy a place? And, this is 2 years off kind of thing. So in our mind, we were over and done with for a while, no more conversations. And then I love the proactiveness of yourself and a mortgage broker as well that came to us with options going, this is what you could do. This is how much you can afford. This is the opportunity that there is. And that took us a bit by surprise, not recognizing or realizing what we had the opportunity to buy, what was out there in the market and so on. So that was absolute testament to your proactiveness in this space where we were completely laid back and gone, we're not doing anything in this space at all.
Yeah.
And you just simply led the way. So I just want to recognize that from yourself and obviously a mortgage broker as well, where you work closely with.
Yeah, amazing.
yeah, so we weren't actually looking for property at this time. We really thought we were over and done with, and you actually got us thinking about it and made
The crack carrot.
I remember you brought forward another property before this one. We put in an offer. We signed the contract.
right. Our rest. Yes.
Yeah, no, this one was, yes, our West Perth again. And, we had so much success with the previous one in Perth, so we thought, why not? And I guess just how things go, you said, I might have something else. Just hold off responding to the email, it was 12 o'clock. And then I remember you presenting us with this offer at 2 o'clock, and it was the fastest property we've ever purchased. I think we made a decision in 7 minutes.
I was co-signed in 3 hours. By
That's
5
right.
p.m. that day, it was signed by us and signed by the seller too. So it was a decision in 7 minutes and co-signed by both parties within 3 hours. So that was the fastest we've ever spent that much money. But absolutely incredible decision. And we can talk about the yield, which is
Yeah.
Well, I think if I can step in, like the reason why we wanted to go for a purchase like this and why I quote unquote dangle that carrot was that I recognized that you guys needed to start transitioning into more cash flow to get to your goals, right? And you obviously had a limited borrowing capacity moving forward. So whilst we had that opportunity, I wanted to try and exploit any potential opportunities that come forward. And I certainly saw some opportunities that really could tailor to your situation. And so, yeah, that's really why we want to target that high yield type property.
Yeah, so it is a 2-bedroom, 1 bath in Townsville. And we purchased it for 272,000. And this is in 2024. So just, 12 months ago, just under. And I know we were looking at cash flow at the time, but funny enough, when we had it valued last month again, it's come up as being valued at 63K more than what we purchased it for.
Yeah, that's amazing, isn't it? 25%. Yeah, look, I think the thing I recognize is that once a major or regional capital city, the house prices really kick off, the units will never stay stagnant. There will be a point where the units will catch up. And so we recognize that as well. So booted with the cash flow, we got that capital growth as well, which is obviously a bonus for you guys. And you've got more options to play with. But yeah, potentially this one will be one that stays in your portfolio and to give you that income. And from memory, that's actually about a 7 to 8% gross yield, which is pretty
This is the highest gross yield we have. I thought it was just
Very close. We got really lucky that even the body cop on this one is, unheard of. It's very low, low maintenance as well. So it's been performing really well.
Yeah, it's not often we target townhouses, but in this case we did because the body corp actually covered how much you would probably pay in insurance in Townsville on a house these days anyway. And you don't have much common property here. You don't have a swimming pool, you don't have lifts, you don't have all of that. The fact that should cover your building insurance plus more really spoke volumes to us. So yeah, we took that factor in your yield and it really still came out positive. So I can only see that one growing. So now, tell me about your final portfolio. I recall that was the final one. The bubble one.
Yes.
You're done, look, for now?
For now, unless you dangle another carrot or the banks give us more money.
That's it. Well, tell me about your portfolio now, your summary, like what's it valued at?
Yeah, so it's 5 investment homes and we've got a total value of about 3.3, with majority, about 2/3 still owing.
Yeah, cool. So about the loan to value of about 66, 67%, which is really good because you've only just purchased a number of properties recently and they've obviously really gone up, which has brought your overall loan to value ratio down. And $3.3 million.
Yep.
Which is very significant in the overall scheme of things. How many properties altogether now, investment properties? That's 4, 5?
5 investment plus
Plus your PPR. So the stats out there is that about 79% have 1 and 19% on top of that have 2. So 90% only have up to 2 investment properties. You guys have 5 and you guys are very much in the elite bracket with your properties. So you are right. You probably don't have much more to do at the moment. And I just want to say congrats to you guys because it's not easy mentally and financially to come back from the first investment property you went through on Footscray. And not only that, you're playing with different PPRs on top of that as well. So I think that's fantastic. You guys have done extremely well. And I'm sure when you first bought your Lyndhurst property, 3.3 mil worth of property in about 10 years probably wasn't on your radar.
No chance. No, wouldn't have dreamt of this. And it's a testament, honestly, to you and the team that's helped us get to where we are because we didn't think all of this was possible, let alone know how to do it, how to execute it, where to buy any of these things, right? We had this bit of a goal of what we wanted to do in terms of retirement and like the reality of the plan to make it happen, we have no clue. Or we still have no clue, I should say. And yeah, it's just a testament to your capability and proactiveness to see us through to where we are right now.
Bet I'm like a proud dad here. No, very soon.
So you should be.
Look, I won't take all the credit. Obviously, there was a buyer's agent previous as well, but you guys have done amazing. And on top of all that, you've obviously got the game plans financial tracker, which is really showing you your forecasting and what to do in the next moves. And it's really a good visual tool to understand how you get to your goals. And my understanding is you're not far off now to essentially, what is your goal at the end of this? What are you trying to do? I know that sort of changed over the last decade, but tell me about what you want out of all of this.
So a couple of things, right? So I think this is like a bit of a risk-based or fear-based driven drive where we believe when we retire, there's not going to be a pension as there is right now to a great extent. So we need to figure out how we can, support ourselves. When our kids grow up, the chance of them being able to afford a house is going to be much harder than it is right now. And already right now, again, the property market is just ridiculous. And so, what role do we play in supporting them getting into the property market? But also the third bit for us is when we do retire, we want to figure out how do we live the lifestyle that we want, and travel is a big part of that. And so if we can invest now for that retirement, that cash flow, the financial stability to continue the travel that we do right now, that's the hope or the dream. And, with these things in place, we are really hopeful that we can see that through.
Yeah. I think one thing a lot of your friends know, but a lot of the listeners may not, is that you guys travel more than anyone I know. And you guys, I think, very similar to us as a couple, but you were doing that every year for the past 10 years and you're still buying properties. So I think the sort of stigma that you can't buy property is pretty much blown out the water, because you've just shown that you can really live your life and build wealth on the side, and you don't have to do it in your backyard. You can buy affordable properties in different parts of Australia and really build wealth that way, and obviously getting an income out of it. So that's great that you weren't having to sacrifice. I think that's the biggest thing here, your life really, to build this portfolio.
Absolutely. And I think that the point that you just made is around, you don't have to buy your own backyard. We wouldn't not have a clue. Like everywhere we were looking was no own backyard. And own backyard is like, 20K radius, because I don't know north and west of Melbourne and whatnot as well. So not only has the same city, but the same suburb kind of same region that we're in. And it's just, it need that capability from experts such as yourself to make that happen. So even though we've got a few properties and whatnot, I would have no clue as to what to buy next or where to look for next, right? You do need that expertise. And for us, that the lesson learned for us is build that A team.
I think that's been our biggest learning curve, is to have the right support network around you. So property strategists like yourself, you can see the difference it has made from property 1 versus property 5. But also, and the right mortgage broker. Our mortgage broker is fantastic, proactive, thinks around the things outside the box, and is always, even under time crunch and time pressure, is able to navigate the complexities of our portfolio to find us the best deal. Shout out to Act on Wealth, they're brilliant. Also having the right accountant, so someone who understands properties, understands our goals and our strategies, and if they invest in property themselves, that's a bonus. And also having a great relationship with your property managers. I think that is key, finding the right property managers, because when it's in a different state and you can't visit or tend to your properties every day, it's so important. So I think that's been our biggest lesson learned, is it's so critical to, even before getting into property investment, to ensure you build the right team and the right support network around yourself.
And so we really got to be the A team. Like we had an accountant until just very recently that simply didn't understand the property space. And so we don't know if we got the right advice, whether we got the right returns and so on. It's only the last 2 years maybe that we had a referral to a greater property accountant, a tax accountant. That's really helped us.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. When you're buying interstate and you're also relying on professionals to give you the optimum, the tax advice or the brokering advice, I think that's crucial to have the locals and the right professionals. I think the finance you hit on, just simple as whether you have principal and interest only, right?
Yeah.
It really makes a massive, massive difference about how your portfolio will turn out. And I'm glad that you've been able to structure that in a way now that you can sustain the portfolio, and that way over time you can get the growth that you need. So congrats, guys. And it sounds like the plans moving forward is really just to wait for now and see, consolidate, make sure your finances are still on track, and see how the portfolio runs. Is that right?
That's fundamentally it, but also be guided by you as and when we need to adapt and change and respond to whatever environmental factors is, lead on you. Like once again, it's the A team, you're the A team. Our plan is your plan, and we'll be guided by you as we proceed over the next few years and decades.
Yeah, awesome. Well, look, you guys are far further than the majority of property investors out there. So you guys should take a pat on the back and really be proud of what you guys have achieved and what you will achieve as this property portfolio takes its own brain of its own and carries on. So well done, guys. And, really nice to understand a bit about your background as well and talk property. So thanks, guys. And thanks for being my first guest as well.
Our pleasure, our absolute pleasure to be on here. And once again, thank you for taking us along this journey. Honestly, we would not be here if it wasn't for you. So absolute recognition and appreciation for your proactiveness, leadership, expertise, all the above to bring us to this position. And looking forward to a whole lot of a better future thanks to your great work.
Thanks, guys. We'll speak soon. Hey, guys. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed the chat, feel free to drop us a rating on Spotify or wherever you listen. It helps us reach more listeners to help them with their journey. Catch you in the next episode.